My name's Daniel Ward. I'm 39 years old, and for most of my life I thought I understood loyalty. Turns out, I didn't even understand the word. I used to believe people were simple. You love, you work, you try to do right. You build trust, and trust builds your life. But when that trust is shattered, it's not just your heart that breaks, it's your sense of reality. I guess that's why I'm sitting here now writing this down like some kind of confession. Not because I want forgiveness, no. Because what happened needs to be told exactly how it was. No filters, no excuses. So this is how it started. I met Claire 15 years ago at a corporate seminar in Chicago. She was an event coordinator, sharp and calm under pressure, the kind of woman who made chaos look like choreography. We got married 2 years later. We built a home, the kind with the faint smell of coffee every morning and laundry left half-folded on the couch. We fought sometimes, sure, but I thought we were solid. I worked as a private investigator back then, mostly insurance fraud, background checks, missing assets. Nothing glamorous, nothing cinematic, just tedious truth hunting for people who paid well. Ironically, that skill, the same one that paid our bills, became the very thing that destroyed my marriage. The first crack appeared on a Thursday night. Claire had a late meeting, something about a new client event downtown. But when I called her around 9, she didn't pick up. Then 10, then 11. At midnight, she texted, "Sorry, still at work. Don't wait up." It wasn't the words that bothered me, it was the timing. Claire wasn't careless. She never let a text come that late without an explanation. And then, the next morning, she came home wearing different earrings. Tiny gold hoops instead of her usual silver studs. That's how my brain works. I noticed the small things most people overlook. She said she crashed at a coworker's place because it was too late to drive home. I said nothing. I just nodded and made her coffee. That was mistake number one, silence. Over the next few weeks, she became distant. More makeup, new perfume, phone always face down. You know the pattern, the playbook of the guilty. But I didn't confront her, not yet, because that's what I do for a living. I gather evidence before I strike. So, I did what came naturally. I opened a new case file under the name C. Ward. It started with a GPS tracker under her car. Then remote access to her cloud backups. Nothing illegal, just the kind of digital shadowing any half-decent investigator can do blindfolded. 3 days later, I had the first proof. A dinner reservation for two, a hotel receipt, a photo from a security camera, and the man. His name was Ethan Cole, an attorney, 41, married, father of two. Someone I'd met once before at a charity auction Claire organized. He shook my hand that night, looked me in the eye. I remember thinking he had a good grip, firm, confident. The kind of grip that says I get what I want. Now I understood why. I could have confronted her then. Most men would have. But anger is a luxury I don't allow myself until I understand why. So I watched longer, recorded, collected, waited. I learned they met at a boutique hotel off Michigan Avenue every Tuesday. Room 407, he'd arrive first, she'd come 20 minutes later. Always the same. There's a strange numbness that comes with betrayal. You think it'll break you, but instead, it hollows you out. You stop feeling. You just observe. That's when I stopped being her husband and became her investigator. The breaking point came on the fourth Tuesday. I followed her car to the hotel, parked across the street. Rain was coming down in sheets, blurring everything in the windshield, like the city itself didn't want me to see. At 8:43 p.m., she walked in. Red coat, hair tied back, purse on her right shoulder, a detail I'd remember later for reasons that still make my stomach turn. I waited 15 minutes, then 20. Then I went in. The front desk clerk didn't even look up when I flashed a fake badge. "Building inspector," I said. "Fire code on it?" He pointed to the elevators. I went up. When I reached room 407, I could hear the sound through the door, muffled, rhythmic, human. It's strange how betrayal has a sound. It's not just the noise of two people. It's the sound of your own life being erased in real time. I could have gone in. I had the MasterCard from the front desk. But instead, I just stood there listening, counting heartbeats that weren't mine. When I finally left, I didn't feel rage, just precision. That night, I poured myself a drink and opened a blank folder on my laptop. Operation Cold Glass. Inside, I started mapping timelines, connections, vulnerabilities. I wasn't just going to expose them. I was going to dismantle them, piece by piece. The first phase was easy. Athens' law firm handled a lot of sensitive real estate contracts and a lot of gray money. I'd already done freelance background checks for some of their clients. I knew where to look. In less than a week, I found something. A set of falsified compliance reports he'd personally signed. A minor fraud, but enough to ruin a career if public. And Claire, she had no idea that her lover's biggest weakness was sitting right in my inbox. I started sending anonymous tips, one to his firm's HR, another to the IRS, and a third to his wife, Emily Cole. The first domino fell within days. Friday morning, Claire came home pale. Athens being audited, she said. Someone tipped off the feds. He's freaking out. I acted surprised. That's awful. She looked at me for a second too long. Maybe she saw something in my eyes. Or maybe she was too wrapped in her own panic to notice that I'd already begun tightening the noose. That's when I realized something chilling. It wasn't revenge I wanted. It was control. That weekend, I went through Claire's phone while she showered. Not the texts, she'd deleted those. But the voice memos. She always forgot about those. One of them was from Ethan. His voice sounded nervous. If anyone finds out, it's over for both of us. You have to destroy the files. Files. What files? That single word opened a door I didn't know existed. I dug deeper into Ethan's personal cloud, then his firm's encrypted database. And what I found made my blood run cold. There were files, dozens, tying him to a bribery network involving real estate zoning and political kickbacks, names, amounts, dates. Claire didn't just cheat with him. She helped him cover his crimes. She'd used her event accounts to launder small sums, thinking they'd never trace it. She wasn't just unfaithful. She was complicit. That's when everything changed. Because now, this wasn't just about a marriage. It was about justice. And justice, I've learned, is just another name for revenge that's had time to mature. People think revenge feels like fire, hot, blinding, uncontrollable. They're wrong. Real revenge is cold. It's math. It's the art of patience. Every move I made after that night was deliberate. I'd stopped being a husband long ago. Now I was the investigator, the prosecutor, the executioner, and my wife was my case file. The morning after discovering the bribery files, I went to my office early. I had a single goal: to make Ethan and Claire collapse under the weight of their own secrets, not with violence, not with emotion, but with precision. I started by cleaning the digital trail, encrypted my logs, rerouted IP traces through multiple ghost servers I'd built years ago. I knew that when this was over, someone would come looking, maybe cops, maybe Athens people, but they'd find nothing. Next, I copied the incriminating data to 3 different USB drives. One I kept in a locked safe at the office. The second went into a bank deposit box. The third I mailed anonymously to a reporter I knew, a quiet guy who'd once helped expose a local councilman. I wasn't ready for it to go public yet, but I wanted a safety net, and if I disappear plan. That afternoon, I followed Claire again. Not because I needed to, because I wanted to see it, the guilt in motion. She didn't go to work. She went to a cafe on the north side. Ethan joined her 20 minutes later, baseball cap, sunglasses, cliché disguise. I watched from across the street, camera ready. He looked shaken, tapping his foot, scanning the room. Claire leaned in, whispering. I couldn't hear the words, but I didn't need to. I'd seen that expression before. Fear. They left together, went to his car. She was crying. He touched her cheek, said something that made her pull away. Then she got in her car and drove off. Ethan didn't. He sat there staring at nothing, then made a call. I recorded it all. That night, I went through his firm's internal documents again. The deeper I dug, the uglier it got: bribes from developers, shell companies, off-the-books donations to local politicians. He wasn't just corrupt, he was careful, smart, the kind of man who had backups of his own. But so did I. Began constructing a timeline of his transactions alongside Claire's event payments, cross-referencing amounts, timestamps, client IDs. And there it was, a perfect match. She'd transferred funds to cover gaps in his laundering trail. She wasn't just cheating on me. She was laundering dirty money through her own company accounts. When I saw that, something broke inside me, not like glass, but like steel bending under pressure. The next morning, I called her. "Coffee after work," I said. "We haven't talked in a while." She hesitated. "Sure." "Yo, okay." We met at a quiet cafe near the river. She wore that same red coat, the one she wore to the hotel. I wondered if she even realized it. I watched her across the table as she stirred her drink. "How's work?" I asked. "Busy," she said. Her voice sounded mechanical. "Still doing those big events?" She nodded. "Yeah, the client list keeps growing." "You'd be proud." I smiled. "Oh, I am." She didn't notice the recorder running in my pocket. The next day, I called Ethan. I'd gotten his private number through a contact at the phone company, a favor owed, nothing traceable. When he answered, his tone was clipped, irritated. "Who is this?" "Someone who knows you and Claire have been busy," I said. Room 407, Tuesday's silence. "Who the hell are you?" "Let's just say, I'm the man whose life you borrowed." Click. He hung up, but he called back 2 minutes later. "What do you want?" "Nothing yet," I said. "But you'll know when it's time." I let him hear his own voice. The recording of him saying, "If anyone finds out, it's over for both of us." He stopped breathing for a second. "What do you want from me?" "Not money," I said. "You'll find out soon." Then I hung up. That's when the real game began. He started watching me. I noticed it almost immediately. The car parked across the street, the subtle movements of someone pretending not to look, the kind of surveillance amateurs think is invisible. He was scared, desperate, dangerous. And that's exactly where I wanted him. 2 nights later, Claire confronted me. She burst into my office, eyes wide, voice trembling. "What did you do?" I played dumb. "What do you mean?" "Ethan's losing his mind," she said. "He says someone's blackmailing him with recordings, photos." I looked up slowly. "That's terrible." She stared at me like she was searching for something human in my face. Maybe she found nothing. "Daniel," she whispered, "if this is you, please stop. You don't understand how dangerous he is." "Oh," I said softly, "I understand perfectly." She shook her head, tears starting to fall. "He's not what you think. It's not like that. It's complicated." "No," I said. "It's exactly like that." Then I slid a small USB drive across the desk. "Go home," I told her. "Watch what's on that. Then decide if he's worth protecting." She didn't touch it at first. Then, with shaking hands, she took it. That night, I got a text. "Unknown number. You think you're smart, but you don't know what you're dealing with." No signature. But I knew who it was. Ethan. He was panicking. That was good. Panic made people sloppy. I didn't reply. I wanted him to stew. But I underestimated one thing: how far a desperate man would go to stay clean. 2 days later, I came home to find my office trashed. Files everywhere. Desk drawers ripped open. Someone had broken in looking for the originals. I checked the safe. The first USB was gone, but they hadn't found the others. Or the off-site backups. It didn't matter. He'd escalated, which meant I could too. I went to see Emily Cole, Effin's wife. I didn't announce myself. I just showed up at her door with a manila envelope. She looked tired, hollow. "Can I help you?" "Yes," I said quietly. "You deserve to know what your husband's been doing." I handed her the envelope, photos, emails, the proof. She didn't speak for a full minute. Then she said, "Who are you?" "Someone who used to believe in trust." When I turned to leave, she said, "What do you want me to do?" "Nothing," I said. "He'll handle the rest himself." That night, Claire didn't come home. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Her car wasn't in the driveway. I waited until dawn, checking every hour, feeling something between dread and inevitability. At 6:12 a.m., a text arrived. "If you want to see your wife again, come alone. No cops." Attached was a photo. Claire, bound, terrified, in the same hotel room -407. The moment I saw it, something ancient woke inside me. The investigator in me analyzed it, timestamps, lighting, angles. The man in me, though, the betrayed husband, didn't care. He'd taken her. He'd crossed the line from deception into war. And I was done playing. I've always believed there's a moment when a man decides what he's capable of. Not thinks, not imagines, decides. Mine came at 6:13 a.m. right after that photo came through. I stared at the screen until the glow burned my eyes. Claire's wrists were tied with duct tape, a bruise on her cheek. Behind her, I recognized the wall, that hideous beige wallpaper from room 407. Ethan hadn't just taken her. He wanted me to come. He wanted control back. But what he didn't know, what he could never know, was that I'd already prepared for this long before he pulled his little stunt. He thought he was luring me into a trap. He didn't realize he was stepping into mine. By the time the sun was up, I'd packed what I needed: gloves, a burner phone, a small handgun I hadn't touched in years, a pen drive with a live data tracker connected to his encrypted files. I didn't call the cops. That would have been useless. Ethan had friends, lawyers, politicians, maybe even a few in law enforcement. This was personal. Calling the police would just get Claire killed faster. Instead, I did what I'd been trained to do. I built a plan around his ego. Men like Ethan don't improvise. They orchestrate. They need control. They think they're smarter than everyone else. That arrogance is their blind spot. The hotel parking lot was half empty when I got there. Rain had started again, soft and steady, the kind that makes the world feel like it's whispering secrets. I parked 2 blocks away, killed the lights, and waited. Room 407's window was dark, curtains drawn, no movement. I checked the messages again. Come alone. No cops. Of course he'd say that. He wanted to watch me crawl. So I made sure he got exactly what he wanted. At 8:47 a.m., I walked into the lobby. I wore a cap, gray hoodie, gloves tucked into my jacket pocket. The receptionist didn't even glance up. Routine shift, same bored expression. When the elevator doors closed, I caught my reflection in the mirror, pale, calm, eyes hollow but focused. I didn't look like a man on a rescue mission. I looked like a ghost retracing the steps of his own death. The elevator dinged at the 4th floor. I walked out slowly, counting each door. Outside 407. I stopped, listened. Nothing. I knocked once. Silence. Then, faintly, a sound, a muffled sob. Claire. That was all I needed. I took out the passkey card I'd made weeks earlier, swiped. The lock light flashed green. I pushed the door open an inch, then froze. The air inside was stale, metallic, like old pennies and fear. Claire was tied to a chair in the center of the room, a gag over her mouth, eyes red from crying, and behind her, Ethan. He was sitting calmly on the edge of the bed, holding a pistol pointed at the floor, like he was waiting for an audience to arrive. When he saw me, he smiled. "There he is," he said softly. "The great investigator." I stepped inside, shutting the door behind me. "Let her go." "Not yet." He tilted his head. "You've made quite a mess for me, Daniel. I underestimated you." "That's your problem," I said. "You always do." He laughed. "You think this is about your wife. You think you were special to her." Claire started shaking her head violently, tears streaming down her face. "Shut up," he snapped. "You think she didn't know what I was doing? She helped me. You know that, don't you?" "She's not innocent." "I know," I said quietly. that stopped him. He blinked. You what? I know everything. Ethan, the laundering, the kickbacks, the files you buried in that offshore account. I took a step closer. I know about the councilman in Detroit, the shell companies, the fake foundations. You used her. You used everyone. He grinned. Then why not turn it in? Why come here? Because, I said, I don't want justice anymore. He stood slowly, lifting the gun. You want revenge? I didn't answer. He motioned toward Claire. And tie her. Then, be the hero. Let's see if she still loves you after this. I took a small step forward, hands slightly raised. My right sleeve brushed the phone in my pocket, the one still recording audio. He noticed. Ah, so we're playing games again. He pointed the gun at my chest. That's when I saw it, the reflection of movement in the mirror behind him. Claire's wrists twisting, trying to slip the tape. She'd found the edge. Good. I needed 3 more seconds. I looked Ethan straight in the eye. You want to know why I came? Enlighten me. Because you made one mistake, I said. You thought you were the only predator in the room. His expression shifted, confusion, then realization, then rage. I moved first. I grabbed the edge of the chair beside me and swung it toward him. The gun fired loud, deafening, a flash that burned through the smoke of the room. The bullet grazed my shoulder, pain like electricity tearing through my arm. The chair smashed against his wrist. The gun clattered to the floor. I lunged, tackling him back onto the bed. We struggled, fists, elbows, teeth, the raw chaos of 2 men trying to erase each other. He reached for the gun again. I slammed his hand against the frame until I heard the crack of bone. He screamed. Claire was sobbing, trying to free herself. Then silence. Just heavy breathing. My hand shaking. I had the gun now. I pointed it at him. Do it, he said through gritted teeth. You think you're better than me. You're just another liar who needs a reason. I stared at him, at the man who'd stolen my wife, my peace, my sanity. And in that moment, I realized he was right. We weren't so different. We both lived off deceit. I just happened to make mine look righteous. I didn't shoot him. Not then. I dropped the gun and stepped back. Get up, I said. He looked at me, confused. Get up, I repeated. He did, slowly. I picked up my phone and tossed it at his feet. You just confessed on record. That call, earlier. That was the final piece. His eyes widened. I've already sent it to 3 people. If I don't check in by noon, it all goes public. He lunged for the gun, but I was faster. I kicked it under the bed. Game over, I said. He froze, then smiled, the kind of smile that says you don't even know what you've started. You think this ends with me? He said. There are others. People who won't let this go. I walked over to Claire, cutting her free. Then let them come, I said. We left the room in silence. Downstairs, the lobby was empty. Beer smelled like cheap coffee and rain. In the car, Claire stared out the window. Her voice was quiet when she finally spoke. Why didn't you kill him? I looked at her, hands shaking, bruised, guilty. Because that's what he wanted, I said. He wanted me to become him. She nodded slowly, then whispered, you already did. And in that moment, I couldn't tell if she was wrong. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my office, staring at the recording. Ethan's voice. The confession. The threats. Everything I needed to destroy him was right there. And yet, something didn't sit right. There was one phrase he'd said, one I couldn't shake. There are others. People who won't let this go. I played it over and over, analyzing every inflection. And then it hit me. Ethan wasn't bluffing. He wasn't working alone. There was someone else, higher, smarter, hidden. And if Ethan was just the middleman, then this wasn't over. Not even close. The morning after the hotel, I burned everything. The files, the notes, the photographs, every trace that could link me to Ethan or what happened in room 407. Not because I was afraid of the law. Because I knew they were watching. Ethan's words kept looping in my head like a broken tape. There are others. People who won't let this go. At first, I thought it was just a threat, his way of saving face before everything collapsed. But when I saw the black SUV parked across from my house that night, engine idling, lights off, I stopped thinking it was paranoid. Someone else wanted those files. And they weren't going to ask nicely. Claire was asleep on the couch. She hadn't said much since the hotel, barely spoke, barely ate. I couldn't tell if it was guilt, shock, or both. I stood by the window, staring through the blinds, tracking the SUV. No license plate I could read. Tinted glass. To silhouettes inside. At 2:13 a.m. It drove away. By 3 o'clock. I'd packed us both bags and erased my drives again. When dawn came, we were already on the road. We drove west. Small towns. Cheap motels, cash payments, disposable phones. It felt like running from ghosts. Except I knew exactly what was chasing us. By the third day, Claire broke the silence. Where are we even going? Somewhere they can't find us. Who are they, Daniel? She snapped. Ethan's people. The police. What did you do? I didn't answer right away. She deserved the truth, or at least the version that mattered. Ethan wasn't working alone, I said. He was moving money through your events. But the money didn't stop with him. He was part of a network, politicians, developers, maybe law enforcement. The files I took from him prove it. She stared at me like she didn't recognize the man in the driver's seat. You sent them to that reporter, didn't you? Yes. Then let him handle it. I shook my head. He went missing last night. Her mouth fell open. You're saying I'm saying this goes higher than we thought. We ended up in a roadside motel just outside Des Moines. I used a fake ID, paid cash, checked the locks twice. Claire was trembling when she sat down on the bed. What if they come for us? They already will, I said. That's why we stay ahead. She laughed bitterly. Ahead? You think you're some kind of hero now. I turned toward her, my patience gone. You helped them, Claire. You signed the transfers. You covered Ethan's tracks. Tears welled in her eyes. I didn't know what I was helping him do. I thought it was just tax stuff, minor adjustments. I cut her off. Stop lying. You knew enough? She looked at me then, not as a wife, but as if I was a stranger holding her fate. What are you going to do with me? She whispered. Nothing, I said flatly. You're the only witness I trust. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying Ethan's face, the smirk when he said, You think this ends with me? He was right. The files I'd stolen contained references to something called Project Halberd, a code name buried in the metadata of the financial logs. It appeared 37 times, attached to shell companies across 5 states. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew who could tell me. One of the names in Ethan's encrypted contact list, D. Sloan, internal auditor, State Department of Commerce. I'd met him once before years ago, during an insurance case, a bureaucrat with a conscience, rare breed. If anyone knew what Halberd was, it'd be him. The next day, I left Claire in the motel and drove 3 hours east to meet Sloan. I told her it was a grocery run. She didn't believe me, but she didn't stop me either. He lived in a modest suburban house, too quiet, too tidy, the kind of place where nothing bad should happen. When he opened the door, he looked surprised but not shocked. Ward, he said, been a while. Can I come in? He hesitated, then nodded. We sat at his kitchen table, 2 mugs of coffee between us. I need to know what Project Halberd is, I said. He froze mid-sip. Where did you hear that? From a man named Ethan Cole. His expression darkened. You shouldn't be here. Then tell me why. He leaned forward, voice low. Halberd isn't a company. It's a fund, a black budget account funneled through fake real estate projects. Ethan was one of their fixers. They move money through event companies, charities, PACs, anywhere it looks legitimate. My stomach twisted. So Claire's company was a pipeline, he said. She might not have known, but she's part of the trail. And if you have files on this, you're in deep trouble. I stared at him. How deep? He hesitated. People connected to Halberd don't just vanish from the record. They vanish completely. When I left Sloan's house, I knew I was already too far in to back out. I called Claire. No answer. Second call voicemail. Third phone disconnected. By the time I reached the motel, the room was empty, her bag gone, the bed unmade, on the table, a note. I can't do this anymore. I told them where the files are. I'm sorry. My blood ran cold. I opened the motel door and saw two men standing by my car, suits, dark glasses, the kind of posture that screams federal or worse. I ducked back inside, grabbed the burner phone, and bolted through the back exit. By the time they reached the room, I was already gone. I drove through the night. No lights, no destination, just the sound of my heartbeat and the ticking clock of inevitability. Claire had betrayed me again, maybe out of fear, maybe out of survival. It didn't matter. She'd given them the location of the files, the safety deposit box. That meant they were already going for it. At 3:42 a.m., I reached the small bank branch in Cedar Rapids. The street was empty. I parked 2 blocks away and watched. A black van was parked at the curb. 2 men in dark jackets were cutting through the lock. I stepped out quietly, keeping to the shadows. My shoulder still ached from Ethan's bullet, but adrenaline drowned the pain. They broke the door open and disappeared inside. I followed. The bank was silent except for the distant hum of fluorescent lights. I moved toward the vault corridor, gun drawn, breath slow and measured. One of the men was crouched at the safety boxes, drilling into mine, box 3112. I stepped behind him and pressed the barrel to his neck. Walk away, I said. He froze. The other man turned, raising his weapon. 2 shots. One missed, one didn't. He dropped. The second man lunged, and I fired again, point blank. Silence. The smell of gunpowder filled the air. I grabbed the box, shoved it into a duffel, and ran. By the time I hit the road, the city lights were fading behind me. My hands were shaking, my mind blank except for one thought. This wasn't revenge anymore. It was survival. Somewhere out there, Claire was still alive, or maybe not. I didn't know anymore. But I did know this. Whoever was behind Project Halberd had just lost their leverage, and I was going to find out who they were, even if I had to burn the whole network to the ground. When you burn a life down to the studs, you think the fire will cleanse everything. It doesn't. It only reveals the bones. The truth is a pale thing under all that ash, and it stares back at you with no mercy. By the time I reached the end of the line, by the time I found the person who had orchestrated Halberd from the top, I had stopped being the man who once loved Claire. I had become a ledger of hurts, a list of names and transactions and faces that owed me an explanation. The list had led me to the kind of office with glass so thick your reflection looked like somebody else. Floor 37, Suite 3710. A brass plaque. Martin Sloan Private Investments and Consulting. Everything in me tightened when I read his name. Not D. Sloan, the low-level auditor I'd visited. Not an obvious criminal. This man, the one whose handwriting appeared in the margins of offshore contracts as consultant, and whose address matched the shell companies. He smelled like a man who'd learned how to grease the gears of power and never get his hands dirty. He was the kind of man who wore absolution and called it an art form. It had taken 2 months to reach him. Nights of stolen motel showers, days where hunger felt like a distant obligation. A small army of burners and throwaways that made me look like a ghost. I'd followed paper trails, traced IP hops through 3 continents, bribed 2 clerks, blackmailed 1 mid-level city comptroller into giving up a stand ledger. I won't lie, some of the things I did to get here would make the priest in me wince. But none of it mattered anymore. The ledger of crimes I'd built was heavier than any conscience. When I walked into his office, he expected the usual: men with polished shoes and clean suits. Men who would smile and sign things. Instead I was a man with a jacket that had seen rain and a pair of tired eyes and a duffel that smelled like stale motel sheets. "Sloan," I said, and he peered up from a cup of coffee he'd been pretending was important. He smiled like he'd heard my name 100 times before. You are persistent, Mr. Ward, he said. Come to sell something, buy something. I placed a USB drive on his desk like a wager. I'm here to close an account. He didn't move. We don't do business like that here. Oh, we do, I said. When the bank vault opens, and your men come looking for what's missing. You do business like that. I watched his face, the tiny changes. Where a man's composure fractures. You're mistaken, he said. You once told a client, always keep one ledger honest, the one you keep for yourself. I had his voice. Recorded in a dinner meeting years ago when he'd laughed about other people's immorality while ranging a donation. That was your line. He blinked. I don't remember saying that. You said it to me, I said. You also signed 3 of the Halberd shell accounts as consulting. You put your mark on the cash flow that paid off council members and funneled money into the election slush that bought zoning approvals. Ethan was a fixer. Claire's events were a pipeline. You were the architect. Something like pity crossed his face then. You think destroying a file will bring justice. You think spilling dirt on men like me won't get you killed for men like you, I said. Justice is inconvenient. I didn't kneel. I didn't beg. I had a list of emails and a handful of copies of bank statements that would burn his clients and his friends and his comfortable life. I had proof that led to people who could not ignore it without being complicit. He folded his hands. Who's on your side, Mr. Ward? I answered truthfully. No one I can trust, but I have 3 routes to the public. A reporter in Chicago, another in D.C., and a secure drop to an investigative outlet that will publish anything that looks like corruption with a byline and a goddamn subpoena. He laughed, low and cold. Publish and see what happens to you. I already published one thing, I said. Ethan didn't survive his little spiral without people noticing. The feds opened a file. Investigation started. You had to move fast because the teeth were in the throat. That's why you sent men for my deposit box. That's why you took Claire. He was very still. The mask slipped for a second. He was human after all. I can give you a deal, he said. I can make this go away, walk away, disappear. And in return I'll ensure your wife is safe, wherever she is. The word safe tasted like rot. He loved the word because it implied control without mess. You think you can protect anyone? I asked. You think Halberd hasn't taught you the lesson that paper burns? That people, my voice broke for a second. I hadn't meant to show that to him. He closed his eyes, the gesture a small surrender. Mr. Ward, you're not the first to try to take down something larger than himself. You won't be the last. But if you value your life, I cut him off. You sent men to a motel to steal my box. You didn't expect me to follow the trail. You hired killers to make Claire look sacrificed. You used her like a pawn because you assumed I'd fall apart. You were wrong. He opened his eyes slowly. What's your price then? Expose you, I said. Expose Halberd publicly. I'll drop the files in places where they can't be bought off. I'll send copies to every jurisdiction in the chain, local, state, federal. I'll give them to journalists who will make noise. I'll make it a mess so big you can't hire your way out of it. You'll ruin an empire, he said, an empire built from other people's lives. I said, done. Sloan sat back. The whir of the city high above masking the sound of him thinking through contingencies. There's a kind of calculus people like him are good at, weighing losses, buying off outcomes, and Claire, she's a live variable. I said, find out you lied and she dies. Own the truth. Or tell it, either she stays alive because your people are good enough to carry the lie, or she lives because you let the truth out and the pressure keeps your men from doing stupid things. He almost smiled. Clever. I left him there with a deadline. I walked out of the glass cage and felt like a man who'd set a bomb and then carried the detonator away. I had the files. I had the avenues. I had a plan that didn't depend on mercy. I had one soft thing left in me and a fading hope that it was salvageable. The next 3 days were a blur. I fed the files to the reporters in staggered releases, each time to the other so that there was no single point of failure. I handed raw documents, redacted where necessary, to a lawyer friend who had balls large enough to file equivalents in several states. I uploaded encrypted copies to a Dropbox for a consortium of investigative outlets. I watched as the snowball started rolling, and then I waited for the retaliatory blow. It came sooner than I expected. Men came for me on a back road outside a cornfield in Illinois. Black SUVs with no plates, 3 of them. I was driving Claire's old sedan because I wanted the scent of her somewhere near me because it felt like a promise. The corner they boxed me on was too narrow, perfect for an ambush. They forced my car off the road and cracked the door open. They were not amateurs. Steel-barred faces, hands like wrecking hooks. They wanted the USB drives. I had buried them in places only I knew, in ways that required patience and a willingness to risk dying to retrieve them if necessary. I also had 4 other copies that existed in the cloud and in the hands of people who would publish if I didn't check in. They pulled me out, rough and fast. I had a pistol but not enough room to draw it. A boot came down on my ribs. One of them, a long-faced man with a scar, asked in a voice like gravel, "Where are the files?" I smiled then, not because I was brave, but because there is a moment when someone has to realize they're not the only animal in a trap. "They're already public," I said. "Ask the internet." One of them swore, and the scar man spiked his head back like he'd been slapped with a wet towel. The SUVs peeled away, leaving me bruised and bloody and alive. They left a message. On the gravel, though, a card with a name and a number, and a warning that if I wanted the rest of my life I should be quiet. The news cycle was a wildfire. Journalists called, anchors spoke breathlessly. Men were named. Sloan's firm had a corporate statement that was the moral equivalent of a tissue. The days blurred into legal filings and subpoenas and televised hearings. Halberd's clients started to distance themselves. Donations were returned. A senator who'd received Halberd money denied everything on camera, and then quietly resigned. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt hollow, because triumph, in this context, meant Claire's name trailed through headlines with accusations of embezzlement and complicity, because truth exacted its toll and the ledger of lives ruined by Halberd grew longer than the list of arrests, because people I liked and had once trusted were implicated, because Sloan still smiled politely at press conferences and maintained a lawyer who made the right noises. Claire was not in the news. She was in witness protection, or so they said. The shadowy bureaucracy that swallows people who cooperate offered her anonymity and a chance at a life where she'd never open an event planner's spreadsheet. She chose it, not to save herself, but because she wanted to stop this from expanding. There's a kind of courage that doesn't look brave. It looks like retreat. She left me a note. A short one left in a mailbox I checked 2 months later in a safe town the state had arranged. No signature. "I'm sorry for what I did. I didn't know how to stop. I'm sorry for the men I helped. I'm sorry for what I made you. If there's any peace left, I hope you find it." See, I read it twice, then burned it in a roadside sink pit and watched the ash spin in the wind. The arrests came. Men with suits and clean collars went to jail. Ethan was convicted, not just for the laundering but for the kidnap and the attempted murder that had been patched together by the records I and others had supplied. Sloan, he slipped initial progs, but finally surrendered under the pressure of multiple jurisdictions and a mountain of public evidence. He took a plea that included a quietly negotiated settlement and a jail term. The network fractured and bled out into indictments and racketeering charges. The bureaucracy that had once seemed invincible showed a pore seam, and I had found it. I did not celebrate. There is no victory in watching men whose faces you once respected file into a courtroom and stripped down to the ugliness of their deeds. There is no joy in reading lists of names and realizing the cost to everyone who had nothing to do with the appetite for power. In the end, I walked away with my name cleared but not redeemed. I had exposed Halberd and watched the network fall apart like paper under a heat lamp. I had forced justice into the light. But it wasn't the cinematic ending you hope for in a hot bath of revenge, the kind where the hero rides off in a convertible. The cost was real. Claire was gone, probably forever. Rachel, the quiet accountant who started this trail, disappeared into something like safety, and then I heard no more. Ethan's children were living with a mother whose husband was a headline. The city felt the tremor for months. Reputations were rearranged. Some collapsed, others transposed like pieces on a chessboard. I moved away. I changed my name legally because the kind of man I'd become had a past that would ink itself onto anyone who tried to cross my path. I teach now small classes about ethics and detection for students who need money and a second chance. It's painfully modest. When they ask where I worked before, I tell them I was in investigations. I tell them half-truths because full truths don't help the living. Sometimes, late at night, I think about the piece of paper Claire left, and then the one I burned, the ash that drifted in the wind. Sometimes I imagine her in a small town with a new name, making coffee, dragging a basket of laundry, smiling at a man who doesn't know where she came from. Sometimes I picture her asleep and safe, and that image is the only tender thing left in me. Other nights I wake up to the sound of rain and the clear memory of a gunshot in a beige-walled hotel room. I wake up with the weight of the ledger in my chest, every transaction a scar. Ashes don't clean. They preserve in a way. They show you the structure of what was consumed. The truth is preserved there, brittle and intact. You can look at it. You can examine the bones until the memory makes sense. You can hand the bones to the people who make laws and hope they do something with them. I don't know if I did the right thing in all of this. I only know that I did what I thought was necessary. The ledger is balanced now, more or less. People went to prison. People paid fines. The system stuttered and coughed, and then began fixing itself where it could. But the cost is my constant companion. If you ask me if I regret it, I will tell you the truth. I regret the part where I let myself become an instrument of harm. I regret the part where my first instinct was to catalog rather than to speak. I regret that Claire ever felt she needed to make deals with men like Ethan. I regret that the currency of power is still allowed to be other people's lives. If I had the power to rebuild, I would start with small things, decent oversight, teeth in the laws, consequences that reach everyone who thinks themselves untouchable. But power doesn't change because a single ledger is exposed. It changes when the systems that enable crimes are rebuilt. I did a thing that mattered. It won't be enough. Years from now, I imagine someone will file Halberd into a footnote of local corruption. People will forget the specifics because forgetting is an efficient mechanism for life to go on. I hope, selfishly, that Claire is living a quiet life under a different name. I hope Rachel sleeps without looking over her shoulder. I hope the students I teach learn to be better than I was. As for me, I keep a small box with the original USB drive, the first one I ever made that started all of this. I look at it sometimes, a little rectangle of plastic that held enough to topple empires. It's ridiculous to give so much weight to an object, but humans need talismans. I put it back in the drawer and close it softly. The ledger is not for me anymore. The truth is out. The ashes are cold. If you ever find yourself with a choice like mine, know this. Truth has teeth, but it doesn't bite gently. It will cost you. You pay either with your life, your love, or your sleep. I paid with a woman I loved and a part of myself. The rest I teach now in small, underfunded classes. How to read betrayal, how to ask the right questions, how to not let power feel like an untouchable thing. Maybe one day that will be enough. Maybe one day the ledger will be lighter. Until then, I will carry the ash and the bones and the sound of rain on room 407.